So the UK's railway industry is going through massive changes. New trains are coming, new stations are opening left and right, and perhaps the biggest change of all, the railways are being slowly renationalised to form a new organisation called Great British Railways, which is what I'm going to talk about today. So, if you're not British, first of all, I envy you, and secondly, Great British Railways is an upcoming state-owned organisation that will oversee Britain's railways from 2027, as a part of the UK government's plan to renationalise the country's railways, an industry that has been in private hands, well, sort of, for more than 30 years. Now, if you've watched some of my documentaries in the past, you would know that I'm not really a big supporter of privatisation. I think rail privatisation in the UK has completely failed and it should never have happened in the first place. Call me a loony lefty socialist if you want, I don't give a fuck. So now that the country's railways are being renationalised under Great British Railways, do I support GBR? Well, yes, but also no. In terms of the concept of GBR, I do support the idea. But in terms of the actual plans the UK government has for GBR, my opinions about Great British Railways are very mixed. Largely due to the way it will function, the fact that it doesn't go far enough in terms of renationalisation, how money will be spent, among other things. About a year ago, I actually made a video talking about my said concerns. Now, this video was made at a time where Great British Railways itself was just announced. Delivery wasn't unveiled, and none of the regional names were unveiled, etc. And the information that did come out was very vague at the time. But now, fast forward a year later, seeing that the delivery has been unveiled and more information about GBR has been released to the public, I feel like it is now the right time to make a follow-up video and take a look at everything that has been unveiled, released, and announced for GBR, to see whether my opinions on GBR has changed or not. Spoiler alert, they have not. Now, without further ado, let's begin. So quite possibly the most biggest thing that has been revealed for Great British Railways is the branding and the livery for the trains. But what does the livery for GBR look like exactly? Well, let's find out. Music! Jesus Christ. What the fuck is this? Okay, if you can't tell, I really don't like this livery. Although, I wouldn't say I hate it because the livery has kind of grown on me a little bit. It definitely does look better in real life than online. It's kind of reminiscent of the livery of Network Southeast in a way. But still, I'm not a big fan of this, for many reasons. One, why the fuck are the designs of those two coaches symmetrical, but the rest aren't? And why does the same pattern repeat in every single coach? That gets me so pissed off every time I look at it. Like, I'm not even joking, every time I see YouTube videos of trains wearing that livery, I first go, oh, GBR, that's cool, I guess. But then when I actually look at the patterns, I just go, like, if you are an actual artist, like me, I'm sure you'll understand. And two, it just looks messy, overly patriotic, because the actual name of Great British Railways wasn't enough, apparently. And it's just all over the place. Apparently this livery was designed by the Department of Transport themselves in-house. Clearly, the DFT has creative geniuses. Now, the reason why the Department of Transport chose to design it themselves was so that the DFT can save spending taxpayers' money on hiring actual artists. Which is fair enough, I guess. But come on. You could have at least tried to make it look less flag shagging and more like an actual railway brand. You've hired an artist to make the design for the digital station clocks and you weren't at all concerned about tax money then. So why not just hire a designer for the livery too? I look on Reddit and I've seen so many people posting their own liveries for Great British Railways and all of them look a million times better. Your livery is that terrible that I think fan-made designs on Reddit look better. And another problem I have with the livery is that this is the only single livery that will appear on the trains. There will be no separate livery for local trains or intercity trains, which is just ridiculous. Every other state-owned railway operator in the world splits their types of passenger rail services into different brands. For example, SNCF in France has the Intercities brand for their classic loco-hauled inner-city trains, and TGV in UE for their flagship high-speed trains, and Deutsche Bahn in Germany uses the ICE brand for their flagship high-speed services, and DB Regio for their regional and commuter trains. Each of these operators have their own distinct distinct identities for their types of passenger rail services. Not only because of marketing and whatnot, but also because they can allow passengers to know what kind of services they offer and the quality of service they can expect. If you use TGV Nuri, you'll know you'll be travelling at high speed. And if you use DB Regio, you'll know you'll just be running a typical local train. Great British Railways just throws all of that out of the window, and they just want to have every single train in the same livery, with the only difference being the names of different regions, like GBR7, GBR Anglia, etc. Having every single train in the exact same livery is not only going to look very unappealing for passengers, especially when you have a livery that looks like this, but it would also cause confusion for passengers trying to figure out which kind of service is which. If GBR implemented an intercity and a Connect sub-brand for some of the regions with one different colour on the livery, then GBR could easily sort out these problems. I don't know if GBR Southwestern Intercity with green instead of red on the Union Jack, or GBR Southwestern Connect with silver instead of blue on the Union Jack would look more appealing than the existing livery, but at the very least, it would allow passengers to identify which kind of service is which. So in my previous rant video about Great British Railways, I was confused as to how exactly GBR will function, as the info regarding GBR's functions were rather vague at the time. However, fortunately, more information about GBR's functions and powers have been released to the public since then. So let's go over all of them. So firstly, which is probably the most obvious one, Great British Railways will be responsible for the day-to-day operations of passenger rail in the UK rail network. So they'll set the fares, implement timetables, actually run the services, etc. Secondly, Great British Railways will take over the current Organisation for Rail Infrastructure, Network Rail, and so GBR will oversee the entire UK rail network and will be responsible for maintenance of the tracks, depots and stations. Thirdly, while the UK government prances around saying it's rail nationalisation, in actuality it really isn't. It's more of just passenger rail nationalisation. Freight rail and rolling stock leasing companies will remain privatised. And finally, which is the most interesting power to me, track access rights. So in the UK, there are these organisations called open access operators. They're basically railway companies that share tracks with franchise operators, and unlike train operating companies where they're given a franchise agreement by the government and are subsidised by the government to operate, open access operators do not. They instead have to get permission and approval from Network Rail and another government organisation called the Office of Road and Rail. However, under Great British Railways, that structure will change. Well, sort of. Instead of having two organisations deciding who gets track access rights, Great British Railways will now have the right to decide who gets track access rights, while the ORR will continue as a regulator and can appeal decisions if a company has been rejected by GBR. So, all in all, those are all of the powers and functions that Great British Railways will have. So have my concerns from my previous video about GBR changed? Well, no. In fact, they basically just created more concerns, if anything. Great British Railways, in its current form, if the government doesn't change anything, will be an operational disaster. But how, exactly? Well, let's go over all of the problems that I think GBR will most definitely face. Problem 1. Abuse of power. So like I said earlier, Great British Railways will be completely responsible for track access rights, and will have the right to decide who gets access rights to the network and who doesn't. Now, while it does streamline the structure a little bit by having one single organisation in charge instead of two, it does raise a lot of eyebrows, especially from freight rail companies and open access operators. What is stopping Great British Railways from simply abusing their track access powers and rejecting every single application on purpose so GBR can favour its own operations for track capacity? Every successful business doesn't want competition, and they'll do anything they can to squander any form of that. Open access operators are very popular with passengers in the UK because they offer better prices and more direct routes, so they will most definitely become an annoyance for GBR to deal with. And there is nothing in the legislation for Great British Railways that says anything about maintaining neutrality when it comes to track access rights, so I can definitely see GBR attempting to try anything they can to squander that. Yes, open access companies can go to the ORR to appeal rejections, and Great British Railways does have a statutory duty to promote rail freight, whatever that means. But let's be honest, is GBR really going to focus on promoting a market within the rail industry that GBR isn't even involved in? And is the ORR really going to do anything? Regulators in the UK are useless. They have no backbone in their leadership whatsoever. And when regulators actually do something, they only do so because the government told them to. Ofcom! So really, if there is ever going to be any action from the ORR, it has to come down to whether they will actually have a backbone in their leadership or not.
I'll just subtract it from today's profit. And and there's no money in here.
So like I said earlier, rolling stock leasing companies will remain privatised. Now because this system is not being nationalised, this means that Great British Railways will have to lease trains from these firms, much like a regular train operating company. And this is completely stupid for many reasons. In fact, just one. Money. Rolling stock leasing companies are not just places where you buy something for a couple of pounds and you keep it forever. Rolling stock leasing companies charge billions of pounds annually for companies to use their trains. And companies only get to lease trains for a short number of years, usually 5 to 7 years on average. So when that time runs up, you either have to pay the leasing firm again or you have to send a train back to the firm. Now this is just going to be a financial nightmare for Great British Railways in the long run. But how? Well, let's look at Great Western Railway for example. So excluding their Class 57s, 165s, 166s and 800s since they're on some sort of permanent lease, GWR's leased fleet consists of 36 Class 802s leased from Eversholt Rail, 45 Class 387 Electrostars leased from Porterbrook, and 26 Class 175s leased from Angel Trains. Now let's see how long they've been leased for and how much they've been leased for. Now the Class 175s have been leased until 2032, and as for the price, well, rolling stock leasing companies usually like to keep their exact costs for leasing private, so I'm going to have to do some estimations here. Now it does say that a £75 million maintenance deal was signed with Alstom, who manufactured these trains, so let's just use that price for the lease. Next, the Class 387s have been leased until June of 2028, and again, how much was the lease cost exactly? I don't know, because screw confidentiality. Although it was a multi-million pound deal with GBR and Porterbrook, so let's say they've been leased for £150 million. And finally, for the Class 802s, like with the Class 387s, they are on lease until 2028. And thank the Lord, Eversholt Rail have actually disclosed the exact leasing price. So according to Eversholt Rail, the Class 802s cost £35,000 per vehicle for leasing. So £35,000 times 36 equals £1,260,000 in total. Now let's do some more maths and work out the exact total GBR would need to pay for these trains to be leased. So 75 million plus 150 million plus 1,260,000. Great British Railways would need to pay £226,260,000. Yikes. And bear in mind, all of this is just for the Great Western region of GBR. I'm not going to attempt to examine every single train across the country because 1, I don't have the mentality to research all of that. Feel free to do it yourselves and share it in the comments or whatever. And 2, I think all of you get the picture at this point. Great British Railways would need to pay a lot of money to lease trains. So what happens if Great British Railways doesn't have a lot of money and they can't afford to carry on leasing trains? Will there be some sort of emergency funding plan to cover that? Will there be an exemption that will allow GBR to keep existing trains permanently and instead have rolling stock leasing companies own any newly built train? What on earth was the thought process behind this? Or heck, if there ever was one. If GBR is going to have to purchase trains from rolling stock leasing firms, it will ultimately end up costing GBR billions of pounds to cover. And it's ultimately going to put more financial burden on the taxpayer. So, yeah. In conclusion, I'm not a big fan of Great British Railways. I'm glad something is being done to fix the great big mess that this country's railways are in, but really, Great British Railways is just going to replace the problems with even more problems. How will GBR spend its money? Will GBR be fair in regards to track access? GBR is just stirring up so many questions and concerns, and they are all just answered with white noise and empty slogans. Now, I'm probably getting way ahead of myself here. Great British Railways has yet to be an actual operation, and the legislation for GBR is still in Parliament. At the end of the day, it ultimately comes down to when GBR is actually operating in order for us to be able to see GBR will truly be a competent organisation or not. So yeah, all in all, that was my video about Great British Railways. Well, second video, I guess. This was a video I've been planning for a while now, but I kept this on the back burner because I wanted to wait until the right time when there was enough GBR related info for me to actually make this. So to those who wanted a follow-up video, hope this was worth it. In all honesty, I don't think GBR is going to be any better, but I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens when we actually see it in operation. But what do you think? Do you like Great British Railways? Do you hate GBR? Are you going to miss privatisation? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to like, share and subscribe for more videos like this. Follow me on Instagram and Threads, join my Discord server, and I shall see you all next time. Cheerio!